Good morning, everyone. Hello. Good morning. Good morning. How is everyone doing today? How's everyone doing today? I hope everyone is doing well. Let's see. Good morning, Ramesh. Good morning, Icy. Good morning, Track Rays. How are you guys doing today? It's so good to see all of you today. I am a little quiet today because I'm just tired. I am very tired today, so don't mind if I'm a little less energetic than normal. Hi, Wasabi. How's it going? It's going well. Thank you, Track Rays. I'm sorry, I'm still processing everything. I'm very tired. I had a horrible bout of insomnia and I didn't get to sleep until about 5 in the morning. I wake up at like 8, so I had maybe 3 years of sleep. I mean, 3 years, I wish. 3 hours of sleep, so pretty tired. Is that the real one this time? I'm always real. Yeah, okay, that was a funny meme. Definitely dark humor. Are you better? I'm getting better. I'm still feeling the twinge in my back. I still feel a twinge in my back. But I'm doing better. For those of you who don't know, I had a little bit of I got a little hurt over the holiday. I had an unfortunate little spill where I fell and I hurt my back. So I spent all last week. If you wondered why I wasn't streaming last week, all last week I was kind of resting. I was going to take a break anyway for that week, so that way I could spend time with my friends and family, and you know, take care of things here. But behind the scenes. But yeah, I ended up hurting my back, so I didn't get to take care of everything. I didn't get to take care of everything I wanted to, but I took the time to recover, so that way I can be here with you guys, because I really hurt my back pretty badly. So nothing broken. Essentially I just sprained my back, so I'm okay though. I am feeling better. I'm recovered. I still feel a twinge in my back, so if I move around a bit or I pause the stories at any time, I just trying to make myself comfortable. Let's see. Happy New Year. Yes, Happy New Year, everybody. For all those I didn't get to say it to, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I hope you enjoyed your Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever holiday you celebrate. So yeah, I hope all of you had an enjoyable one. I hope you all had a wonderful New Year's. I spent it with my friends. It was like a fun time. It was very fun. I can't legally die for 3 hours in Orlando, Florida. That's some propaganda there, Wasabi. I have not been in the state of Florida for at least 7 years. So who unsubbed? Probably the bots. I wouldn't be surprised if bots were the ones that did it. They weren't unsubbed. I'm not upset. Happy New Year, Track Rays. Thank you. Happy New Year's, Ramesh. Also, thank you. But yeah, today we're going to be reading Black Pearls of Faerie Strand. This is an anthology of rewritten and reimagined fairy tales. There's some that are very familiar, some that are probably old, or so they're all old, but you know, some that are familiar and well known, some that are not as much. So yeah, I'm excited to start reading. This is one of my favorite stories. I love fairy tales. I also love reimagined fairy tales, so for me this is a lot of fun. I always love seeing fairy tales reimagined and twisted and retold in different ways or different perspectives, which is always so much, which is almost always so much fun. So I'm very excited to start reading. I'm gonna see how long the stories are. I may do 2 today or maybe 3, I am not sure. Because it's an anthology, it's a collection of independent stories, so each chapter will essentially be a new story. Some tea. How long is the story? Well, since they're individual stories, so one chapter would be a story, so maybe a few pages of like maybe 10-15 minutes long, I don't know. It depends on how long the chapter is, I guess, because every chapter is its own individual story. Give you coffee? I wish I could give you coffee. You're welcome to my coffee and pudding if you want. I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna head out. I finally beat Best the Fish Lady. Not. Oh yeah, you're playing Undertale Yellow, I believe, right? Really neat. Really, really neat. How is that, by the way? It looks like fun. Everyone loves to listen. I love fighting Undyne, both in the pacifist and the genocide route of the original Undertale. I think I might want to try to revisit doing the Undertale genocide route again, maybe. For those of you who remember, I played Undertale in its entirety through the neutral and pacifist route. And I didn't get to finish the genocide route because everything just didn't want to work. And also skill issue. My own skill issue. Because I suck. But definitely want to try to revisit it again this year sometime. It'll be a lot of fun. Let's see. But yeah, so today we're going to be reading 2 stories. One is a retelling of Rapunzel, and the other is a retelling of the Pied Piper, if those of you who are familiar. If you guys are familiar with those stories, that's great. If not, then let's sit back and enjoy the story. Let me get started. Yeah, because the keyboard had a delay and you were doing the genocide route. Yeah, so hopefully with a wired keyboard, because now my new keyboard is wired, hopefully it'll respond better. And if not, it's more me. It's just me. I suck. It's fine. I can suck at a game. I play to enjoy a game, not to beat it, you know. A lot of people get very. I have a friend who I love playing games with them, but I also hate playing games with them because they take it so very seriously. Like, we actually had an argument over Lethal Company because I was just having a fun little goof and I kept dying because, you know, it's Lethal Company. You have to survive or you die. But I kept dying because it was just a really terrible, like, random seeds. The random seeds were terrible that day, so I kept dying. And he got all mad at me. He was like, "Oh, why aren't you doing like this? Why aren't you doing like that? Blah, 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 blah." And I was like, "Bruh, it's not that serious. It's just a game." You know? Very, 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 very bleh. Okay, my life now. Sans bad time. Have fun, Icy. You got this. I believe in you. Wired keyboard, wireless mouse. Actually, Wasabi's right. It's more like wired keyboard, wired mouse. It came as a set. I prefer wireless mouse. I prefer having a wireless mouse. But this mouse is actually really good. It's very, very responsive and smooth. I'm not gonna you know. Yeah, but it's like taking it seriously to want to meet a goal, and then taking it seriously to the point that you're yelling at somebody for making one small mistake. I'm like, bruh, can't we just enjoy it? It's like if I played like Left 4 Dead 2 with him, instead of like searching this, instead of searching around the map and just goofing off and be like, oh, zombies. He's like, no, let's go. We gotta get to this. We gotta go to. It's like go to point A to point B. No detours, no nothing. Just go straight. Like, bro, like why? Like the whole point is to kill zombies and have a fun time. It's not that serious, bro. Like, chill. We don't have to zoom through the map just to get through it. Like the maps are like Left 4 Dead 2 maps are fairly short, you know. Just have fun. Like, why do we have to zoom through it? It's so lame. It really is really lame. I don't know. I don't like that sort of thing. I kind of had to talk. I talked to him about it because I had to express how I felt about it. Because it was like, bro, you're taking the fun out of a game that just doesn't need to be taken seriously. We're killing zombies. That's literally the whole point. Kill zombies and survive. We'll be fine. If we die, we die. So what? It's not a big deal. I don't know. I hate when people do that because it's like, oh, it's just like you say, oh, it's just a game. It's like not just a game. It's like, shut up. I love playing. That's why I love playing with my friends because it's like, we don't take it that seriously. Like, we don't take it that seriously. We just play. If we don't win, we don't win. If we win, we win. That's it. It's more about the journey, you know. Not a lot of people like to get. Not a lot of people enjoy the journey. Actually, they're not zombies. They're infected. Either way, they're not a living, and they're trying to kill us. They're a threat. Must eradicate. Anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I personally just enjoy the game for the enjoyment of it. Do I want to beat a game if I'm playing a game? Absolutely. Am I gonna have an absolute meltdown like a toddler if I don't? Nah. I'll be frustrated, a little upset, but I'm not gonna be like, I can't believe I want to beat it. I'm not gonna beat the game. This game is, I can't. I can't with those types. That's why I don't. That's why I can't play like console or online like that with randos, because they get like that and it's just like, bro, you're ruining the game for everybody by doing shit like that. I myself am just a little troll when it comes to like co-op games, because I like to have fun and teamwork, but I also like to be a terrible little gremlin and just, just troll people. Not ruin the game, but like troll people sometimes, It's funny. Anyway. Say goodbye to your pudding? You're welcome to my pudding. I make pudding all the time. Enjoy, checkers. I'm worried with everything, charging things. It's the bane of my existence. My phone is always at 70%. I charge things when I'm using them. Like if I'm playing with my Switch, I charge it. If I'm not playing with it, I either turn it off or I just kind of let the battery die. Same with my e-reader, same with my phone. I use my phone all the time so I keep it charged. But like my e-reader, things like that. It's true, the amount of times Kay has autopilot from death and Lethal Company blames it on Bubby. There's a couple of times Bubby did that, and it's not my choice. Because he likes to sit on my hands. So if I'm like, my hand's on the mouse and he decides, I'm gonna sit on your hands, he's gonna do something stupid like that. Right now he's sitting in his basket, not his basket, his little hammock, and he is chilling. He's a sweet baby boy and I love him dearly. Alright, let's get into the story time. I've already spent 15 minutes jabbering away. Alright, so this one, the first story is a retelling. My smartwatch has a non-existent battery at this point. Oh, I wish I could have a smartwatch. That would be super convenient to me. But alas, I do not. Trollish behavior. It's because it's funny. It's funny. You know me. Especially you, Wasabi. You know me. I don't always take games super seriously. I don't take games super seriously. If I'm gonna be goofy, I'm gonna be goofy as hell. You know this. Let's see. Okay, so the first story reading today is a retelling of Rapunzel. It's gonna be a good one. Okay, let's see. Because you guys know Rapunzel. These are like very classic fairy tales that I'm gonna be fairy tales and nursery rhymes that I'm gonna be that are in this book. They're just like the retellings and stuff. So yeah, this one is gonna be a retelling of Rapunzel. Dame Nigrin's Tower. Let's go. Goofball. Yes, goofball. Let's go. Like tangled. Very, kind of, yes. Flying had come naturally to her. When she'd grown of age and joined the ceremony in the grove, Tabitha Nigrin has found her body lifting even before the words were done. She had lost herself in the others each time she'd spun into the night, turning like a thistle, up and up. There were no words for what she felt then, nor did she try to find them. It was simply the reason she lived, the place she had to go, the answer to every question she would ask. Daughters of the moon, children of the night, rise like dew together, until the morning light. When Tabby chanted with her companions, she could scarcely sort her voice from theirs. The song was like a braid, binding them together, joining them in a sacred rite. The owl's cry is our anthem, our altar is the sky, the great mystery is our mother, to whom now sisters fly. Held fast in the wind's strong arms, tumbling through the lacy mists of clouds, Tabby seldom gave a thought to landing, only let her heart swell like the moon, only set her face to the west, where she fancied the sun lay in its dark bed. Landing always came too soon on those magical nights, and it always stung. Not in a physical sense, of course, for it was not the actual coming down, the crisp, almost smug way her toes found the ground, that bothered Tabby. It was the return to earth and the small minds and shriveled hearts that waited for her there, to the pack of dogs that chased her when she left the house, and to the filthy, roomy children who parroted sing-song rhymes. Which fell in a ditch, set her hair on fire. Tabby never thought of herself as a witch, nor had her adoptive sisters ever used the word. They called themselves wise women, and she knew no way but theirs. The coven had taken her in as a babe, and had given her love and a home and the sweet wild joy of flight. That joy, they told her, was neither sorcery nor heritage. It was the gift of every woman who comes to her first blood when the moon is full. She left the coven before her 17th summer and found a place as a weaver's apprentice. When the old woman died, Tabby stayed in her teacher's humble cottage, but her neighbors could not forget where she had been raised. No woman bought her handiwork, and no men came courting. Tabby knew better than to try to change things. She kept to herself instead, tending to the lush garden behind her cottage gate. Everything there brought her solace. The peonies, their great heads crisscrossed by delirious ants, the 4 o'clocks, slow to wake but glorious till dawn, the sweet pea and primrose, unruly as children. Even the kitchen plants filled her with pride when she tended them in the mornings, her hand diving like pale fish among their leaves. The villagers called her Hellcat and Twisted Fairy, or sometimes Devil's Handmaid, but her snapdragons only nodded, blushing in their early sun. Through her garden wall, behind the tumbled ivy, Tabby heard her neighbors gossip. "'Tis says she flies at night. By God's blood, the milk she begged from me did her sour as I set it at her door. Old witches must be young ones first, you know. Have you marked how she leaves her house whenever the Sabbath falls on a full moon?" But her baby roses told no tales, only stared at her shyly from their green nests. So Dame Tabitha Nygren kept her own counsel. Excuse me. Kept her own counsel. She suffered the town's talk with patience and a resignation born of practice, years of it. She had her flowers and few regrets. Still, there were times in the green quiet of her garden when she wondered what it might have been like to have a family and a mother. Instead of sitting, when she was small, in the middle of a dream circle, lifted by dozens of arms as the drowsiness of their spell overtook her, what if she had been cradled in someone's lap? Tabby had seen mothers in town tending their babes. She had even heard, one night as she made her way across old Chauncey's field to the woods, her neighbor singing an off-key lullaby to her youngest. Tabby had peered through the cottage window and see the two of them beside the hearth. There was something in the way that Dame Chauncey held her little one, in the way her voice purred and cracked with tenderness. The scene had lodged itself in Tabby's mind or heart. She was never sure which. Like a tune she didn't know the words to, or a person she could not name, the picture came back to her again and again. She blamed that picture for what happened the following autumn, when the bearded fellow scaled her garden wall. She had found him knee-deep in the watercress and rampion. The bells were silent and all the town dark, and yet here he was, bending over her plants, tearing them up by the fistful. "And what is your business in a poor woman's garden?" She'd come up behind him, surprising him quite as much, she noticed with satisfaction, as the sight of him had startled her. When he stood up, the moon turned his hair to ink, made his face look white and sickly. He had spilled some of the greens, he was stuffing the rest down his vest. He was a long, large-boned man, but Tabby had seldom seen anyone so frightened. "Forgive me, good madam," he stammered, stooping to retrieve the cap he had let fall. I only meant, that is, I was just, if you be so kind." Tabby liked the look of his face, blanched with fear, his eyes glassy currants. She was ashamed of the pride that shot through her, knowing that she was the cause of his stammering and clumsiness, of his high-pitched voice. Awkward with his uncommon upper hand, she said the first thing she could think of to keep him scared. "There will be a price, you know." The fellow looked behind him then, as if he were considering running, right to the stone wall he had just climbed. When he turned back, his voice broke and his tears shone in the corner of his currant eyes. "Please, my lady," he said, I mean only to put by for my family." Tabby leaned close, touching his wrist. "A thief's rampion," she told him, "comes dearer than an honest man's." She wondered who he was, this intruder. She knew he was not Elspeth Chauncey's husband, nor the son of the widow who sold Tabby milk. As for the other men in the village, he had only seen the tinker and the market day vendors. This fellow had not been among them. The stranger bowed now and bowed again. "Anything, madam," he said, clutching his cap. "The greens is for my wife, madam. She is with child and craves them fierce." "So fierce you cannot wait until morning and knock on my door?" As Tabby bent to pick up the scattered leaves, the nervous thief pulled back from her. What tales had he heard? What visions danced in his head? "So fierce you need to take what's not your own." He kept twisting his cap as if it were wringing wet, kneading and smoothing it against his chest. "Alas!" His eyes looked to the heavens, begging to the wafer moon instead of her. "Please, madam, have mercy on a poor soul who meant no harm." Still contrary, she's still perversely glad to see him in such discomfort. Tabby waved her hand in the dark tangle of garden. "There's a stone knocked from my wall," she scolded. "And just look how you've trampled my beds." "But surely, lady," the man had pleaded, "even such as yourself must fear for the unborn babe my wife carries." Mistaking Tabby's stunned silence for compassion, he pressed on. "Even a fiend would not deprive an innocent babe of its father." "If you have fathered innocence," Tabby told him, recovering, "where, pray tell, is the guilty party?" "God preserve us, there be none, ma'am. 'Twas the mindless craving of woman with child is all. John, I must have the rampion or die, she tells me. Those be her very words." "Indeed?" Tabby fixed her eyes on his. "She said die. If he wanted a witch, she would give him one. She meant to die for her supper? No, you shall not take her life. Here." He pulled the leaves from the vest and forced them into Tabby's hands. "I'll take no more plants, nary a one. On my own head, last night was the end, I swear." Last night? Tabby felt a tingle, a shiver of power. "You have been here before." "Oh Lord, oh saints above." The man dropped to his knees, grabbing the hem of her skirt. "I will do anything, give you all I have, only spare my wife." Tabby had not answered, wondering what service she could extract from this man. If he was as strong as he looked, there was a shed to be built and a hay to be brought in before frost. "You can have the babe." He stood suddenly, as if they had just come to terms. "I know that be what you crave, an innocent soul to turn to devil's work." "Listen, fellow." Tabby was almost amused by the picture he nursed in her brain. A child-snatching witch, an unnatural hag who could not give birth and so must steal others' babes. "I ask only some honest labor in return for what you have taken from me." "Aye, when the child is grown, you shall have it," the man told her. He placed his cap again on his head and bowed to Tabby, moving backwards all the while. A sturdy lad or lass to fetch and carry. "Do you honestly expect me to wait years for what is owed to me?" Why did she not laugh? Why did she not mention that the shed or the hay, the wood that needed splitting? "You be fouler than you seem, dame." His eyes found her as he resumed his pitiable hand-wringing, a black heart and a fair frame. It was time she set the fool straight. Tabby followed him and again touched his wrist. "Listen, my good man," she said. "I shall— Yes, you shall have the babe as soon as it's weaned. I will bring it to you, on my oath." "Weaned?" "Aye, ma'am. As the Saviour is my witness, the babe is yours." He stopped his scuttling crab walk and uttered a single bleeding sob. "But it is a human child. It must suck at its mother's teat." "But I do not want—" He held his arms in front of him as if to fend her off. "You have my oath, I say. Only do not harm my wife and me." Now he had reached the gate and turned, and like some frantic animal, tried to walk through it without lifting the latch. At last he remembered himself and, making small panicked grunts, succeeded in lifting the lock and racing off into the night. A baby! Tabby had hardly dared hope for such a thing, nor did she let herself dwell on the thought for long after the man left. Her satisfaction at having frightened him, in fact, soon gave way to self-recrimination. A fine witch she was. Why, she had not even thought to ask his name or where he came from. Even now, he must be laughing at how he outsmarted her. She would surely never see him again. It was not until spring, when buds shouldered their way once more out of the earth, that she allowed herself to think of the promise. She pictured her child, curled like a shoot in its mother's belly, and wondered idly how it was that someone went about being a parent. What did you feed them? And how do you hold one without hurting it? Not that the answers mattered, she scolded herself. Not that they mattered at all. Best to set aside such foolishness and put the new spade she bought at the market to work. Radishes needed to be sown deep. So if you had to ask her, Tabby would have said she was not expecting it, did not want it at all. But when the man came back next fall, carrying the girl in his arms, her eyes had filled with tears of relief. She could not speak, but drank up the child with a thirsty heart. Already pretty, the tiny thing had yellow curls and eyes as blue as the irises that grew in a thick, companionable cluster by Tabby's well. But it was not the dainty features of the fair hair that stunned her, that flooded her own face with warmth. It was the way the baby leaned from her father's hold and reached her arms towards Tabby, as if she was meant to fly across the space between them. Oops. Hold on. I lost my place. Yoop. There we go. Though Tabby was speechless, the man was a veritable gossip. His wife was pregnant again, he told her, and though he hated to part with his firstborn, he knew, fiend as she was, Tabby would hex the second babe if he did not. This one was weaned and walking, and a stout little soul besides. Her needs were few, and she looked as though she would grow into a strong worker. Before were a lot of mouths to feed, and if the new child was a son, why, he bore no grudge. Even witches could be made to serve God's plan. Tabby said nothing, only stared at the treasure he carried. Farewell, my rampion, my tender babe, he told his daughter at last, setting her down and striding to the door. God keep you in his care. He stepped outside and, without another word, left the child standing in front of the hearth. He did not look back or wave to the babe as he named her after a kitchen green, but hurried on as if Tabby might change her mind. The girl did not look after him, only studied Tabby solemnly, and then climbed onto her lap and fell asleep. Tabby had wanted to run after the man, to find out where he lived, to ask the countless questions that suddenly occurred to her. She needed clothes for the child, and shoes and toys. She wondered if Rampion had ever been sick, or whether there was food she must not have. But the weight of that small creature kept her pinned to her chair, fearful of talking or moving lest the movement dissolve the bubble in a stream. Rampion. A strange name, but a good one, Tabby thought. Some girls were called Rose, after all, and some Violet or Pansy or Blossom. Wasn't it better to bear the name of a sturdy little plant, a green that flowered in the summer and gave food for the rest of the year? She listened to the shallow, even breaths of the babe in her lap. She closed her eyes and tried to feel her way to the years that lay ahead. Tabby was not blessed, as some in the coven were, with the gift of second sight, so the image she saw was more yearning than certainty. But it was a comfort nonetheless. A girl fair enough to be a princess, with a slender, graceful form and a laugh that tumbled like falls down a mossy bank. She did not know how long they sat, the little one curled against her with her left thumb in her mouth. Tabby rigid with bliss, counting the small heartbeats that drummed against her own chest. But when Rampion finally stirred, her father was long gone and it was too late to ask him anything at all. They must make do, the two of them, with just each other. And make do they did. Though she could speak only baby nonsense, Tabby's new daughter, the word was too sweet to say out loud, made her wants clear, and each one was given her, nearly as soon as she pointed or cried or smiled at it. Tabby hugged and fed and petted and played. She sang and clapped and laughed and jigged. She made dolls from old bed sheets and crowns from dried periwinkle and sweet William. By spring the girl had spoken her first words, and by late summer she was chattering like a magpie, telling her rag doll secrets or begging her mother for treats. Though Tabby fell into bed each night panting with exhaustion, she laid sleepless for hours, tense and hopeful, her love like a hunger that can only be fed by Rampion's waking and wanting more. She let the garden go to seed, all except the vegetables and herbs that she grew to feed the child. There were not enough hours in the day to waste on primroses. Tabby was tending something far more precious now, something that responded to her care by growing more beautiful with every season. There were times, often when she sat stitching, that she looked up to find the girl playing in a stripe of sunlight spread across the floor. She would stop then, losing a stitch she would have to pick up again later. Sorry, gotta readjust myself a little bit. She would stop then, losing a stitch she would have to pick up later, and stare at the fearful loveliness of her daughter. And when, feeling doting eyes on her, Rampion looked up as well, and she would likely run and put her arms around Tabby's neck, settling in her lap and setting to unpinning her own bright curls. "Mother, mother," she would beg, "brush my hair." Then Tabby would stroke Rampion's shining locks with a brush she had bought at a market, a fine one made of willow wood and boar bristle. The soft lapping of the brush, her hair falling pale as the light across her daughter's shoulders. It worked the same miracle every time, the soaring inside her chest, her heart straining up and up. Her body never left the chair, but her mind and spirit flew away to the sweet future where her lovely child would grow to womanhood, where Tabby would take her by the hand into the sacred grove, where she would teach her what she knew of the splendor of endless joy. Because she cherished this vision, the two of them flying together, Tabby's garden died before her meetings with the coven stopped. But it was not long after the peonies withered, their withered heads drooping on broken stalks, that Tabby began to find reasons to miss gatherings with her sisters in the woods. What had been her greatest joy was now cheating her for a far greater one. Each time she left her daughter, she suffered dreadfully, imagining an endless variety of accidents and illnesses that may strike while Rampion was alone. What if the girl were to wake feeling thirsty, for instance, or to push a stool against the wall to reach the cupboard overhead? And what if the stool tipped and sent her sprawling? Or say she managed to lift the latch and wander outside while Tabby was away. There were snakes in the old garden wall. Tabby had seen several times at dusk, slithering out of sight because she could find their nest. The night she remembered this, Tabby tortured herself with a vision of Rampion being bitten, falling to the ground, crying for her mother, calling and calling until she had no breath left but to lay still and cold. When Tabby told them she could no longer come to the woods, the others had been sad, but not surprised. "You have caught the way of human love," her friend Maeve warned her. "'Tis not a bad way, but it clouds the heart and will make you feel weak. The great mother will never abandon you, but 'tis you that will draw away from her, further and further until you have forgotten how to fly." Tabby had laughed, knowing she would always remember the upward thrust, the whirlings of the moonlit air. "'Twill not be for long," she reminded them all. "Only until my daughter," she said it out loud now, proudly, "comes of age. We will return to these woods after her first blood. The two of us." Maeve and the others nodded, but it was clear they did not believe her. "Paths are never straight," Sheba said, pointing the same figure at Tabby she had once used to show her the stars in the sky. "Turnings and choices leave tangles behind." Tabby's old teacher drew close to her. "You are not likely to find your way back to us." She kissed the younger woman, but it was a sad kiss, one that Tabby felt a long time on her cheek, like a print, a seal of farewell. After that night, she did not meet with the others again, though she did sometimes feel the urge to fly alone, to shoot like a lance through the dark. She stayed true to her changed life and to her new responsibilities. These last were so consuming that they kept her from self-pity. Rampion was soon old enough for lessons. Tabby could not teach her to embroider or to play the spinet, like the daughter of the village mayor, but she had her own skills to pass on. The kitchen garden was still intact, and if Tabby had not raised the stone wall until it met the bottom branches of a cherry tree, the neighbors might have seen the two of them gathering herbs each morning, might have stopped to listen to Rampion's cheerful recitation. Burdock for skin and blood, golden seal for what ails, yarrow for strength, and sometimes she would break off, forgetting the name of a plant. "What is this one, Mother? It has an awful stink. I hope 'twill vanish in the stew." "'Tis tansy, love," Tabby told her, smiling at the way the girl's lips and nose had nearly met the center of her darling face. the root for fevers and flies, the leaves for pudding and cakes. Then let's leave the roots in the ground, Rampion decided. 'Twill grow more leaves that way. You know how I love pudding. There were cooking lessons, too, and darning, and the smattering of Latin Tabby had learned from the coven. It was mostly words that went with flying spells, not the church Latin that other children in town knew. Her sister's church, after all, had been in the wild woods, and that their prayers had focused on thanksgiving, not penance, on the Great Mother, and not the Holy Father. So it was a little wonder that, at last, Rampion came to be regarded with the same suspicion and fear her mother was. It did not happen all at once. There were only whispers at first, some nervous laughter when Tabby and her daughter appeared in public. But if Rampion chanced to stretch her tiny arms towards a stranger and utter a Latin phrase that she had learned, some mistook it for an incantation. And once, when they had gone to a fair in Bridley, and Rampion tried to join a group of children watching a Punch and Judy show, the other children's mothers, one by one, had pulled their sons and daughters away from the stage. But in those early years, while Rampion was still a child, the two managed to brush shoulders with the rest of the village, and no great harm was done on either side. In fact, Tabby had begun to enjoy taking the girl with her to market, loved the way Rampion's cheeks reddened with the fresh air, the way people stared at her loveliness. Sometimes the tradesmen and shoppers even made timid overtures, handing the child sweets or trinkets, stroking her hair and asking if fairies had spun it. It made the final blow all the more cruel, then, that it came on the market day. It happened when Rampion was 11 years old, when her beauty had already begun to stop people in their tracks, to make them gossip and whisper at things that sat like stones in Tabby's chest. Was such a face normal? Were Christ's children meant to be so alluring? Did her sweet shape dissolve at night, turning into the scab-infested leer and hairy chest of a devil's spawn? Perhaps if the hurt had traveled to no further than her own anxious love, Tabby would not have run away, would not have packed up her daughter and taken to the forest like a nomad. But one day, when Rampion joined two girls playing at hoops in the market square, a group of older boys surrounded her. Tabby was bargaining with the apple woman when the boys' song made her turn. Witch's child, you cannot cry when I pinch you low or high. 5, 4 fingers round my thumb. You must not walk where good folk come. Excuse me. Though Rampion eventually forgot the teasing, Tabby relived the ugly scene for weeks on end. It was still burned like a barb in her heart the day she packed their belongings and set off towards an old tower she had found in the woods. They'll never cheat you like that again, she told the girl. Just as she had in the market, Rampion sobbed piteously. But this time it was Tabby, and not the village bullies, who made her weep. She held fast to her mother's skirts and did all she could to prevent her from stuffing the last of the cookware into two bulging saddlebags on the hob, low-flanked mare they had borrowed from old Chauncey. It does not matter, the girl insisted, pursuing her mother in the forest and stumbling along the nearly invisible path Tabby seemed to find without effort. For my sake, mother, let it be. I would rather get teased every day than leave our lovely garden. But Tabby could not forget how the children had poked and prodded, trying to prove a witch cannot cry. When I pinch you low or high. How each wrapped one fist around the other thumb and pummeled Rampion with both hands, joined. Even when the girl began to sob, they did not stop, and afterwards her slender arms had been riddled with ugly scratches and bruises. The tower did little to comfort Rampion, though the shock of it stopped her tears. Jutting from the undergrowth at a slight angle, it no longer belonged to a castle, but stood by itself, a crumbling ruin pointing half-heartedly at the sky. Even Tabby was dispirited as they neared the place, wondering if it could ever be made habitable. She heard the need to please in her own voice, the desperate enthusiasm. See, love, there's a window on high, she told her daughter. You shall be mistress of all you survey. The girl sniffed and looked up to where the two stone gargoyles guarded the tower's single window. Then I'll be a mistress of fearsome rocks and noisome weeds. She kicked aside a clump of mandrake that barred her way and tied their mule to a tree. Pulling an axe from the satchel on his back, she called over his shoulder. Come along, mother. It would seem we must work until the last light to part our front door from these woods. It was true. What once must have been a guard's entrance was all but swallowed up by thick, gnarled vines and brambles. After they had chopped away the brush and forced the small door open, They found a stairway that was sound enough to climb. They followed it to the top of the tower, a spacious, high-walled room brightened on one side by the window, and the other by a second large door. Years before, Tabby supposed, this entrance might have been open to the castle, but if anyone had been foolish enough to walk through it now, they would have found no footing, only dropped like a stone to the woods below. That first day and many after, Tabby and the girls scrubbed and polished. They hauled bedding and benches and trestles from the house they had left behind, and Oops. There we go. From the house they left behind and dragged them up the winding stairs. For though they placed a few sconces and a braided rug in the hall on the ground floor, most of the belongings had to be carried to the topmost room, where the window in the old doorway led in a comforting, buttery light. They pushed the chest against a large opening and hung thick curtains, turning it into a passable window. Through a chink that Tabby assumed once served to rain arrows on soldiers below, they vented a hearth. At last, even Rampion had to admit they had fashioned an elegant eyrie. Whereas the old cottage had made their possessions seem dingy and small, the high stone walls of the tower lent everything they owned a sort of spare majesty. "I shall be quite afraid to sing at baking here," Tabby told her daughter. "It seems more fit for curtsies and perfumed handkerchiefs, this grand place we made." "On the contrary, mother," Rampion, who had not smiled in days, laughed and put down her broom. "'Tis made for trills and long sweet notes." She picked up the skirts, then whirled around the huge room, singing as she spun. The combination of her daughter's tender form and the wild gaiety in her voice made Tabby stop working, dizzy with love, leaning against her own broom. All went well for a few months. Rampion spent hours watching the woods and the fields beyond from the tower window. And when she tired of looking at the land below them, she spent even more hours tramping through the forest outside their door. Tabby's fear of people made her trust the places where they were not. She never worried about her daughter, who came home from these walks with herbs and flowers and mushrooms, with baskets of acorns, blackberries, and the tiny ripe fruit they christened wood plums. What the wild world did not provide, Tabby secured by hard work. If Rampion begged for a new gown, her mother would hire herself out as a servant in town until it was bought. If the girl wanted a book, a few more weeks of work and Tabby would place it in her lap. And if the book was open to a picture of a beautiful dame in a necklace for which Rampion pined, sure enough, Tabitha Nygren overcame her hatred of the village folk long enough to clean their houses and wash their filthy linens. As she worked, she dreamed only of the moment she could fasten those flashing gems around her daughter's neck. When she did, the girl's rapturous smile was worth every ache in Tabby's back, every morning spent on stiff knees. "Oh!" Rampion stared at her reflection in a looking-glass they had bought at Britley the year before. "It is the loveliest thing I have ever seen." She watched the flared light on her new necklace, staring as if spelled into glass. "Will you brush my hair the way you used to, Mother? I feel as though I'm quite outshined." Rampion unpinned her hair, and Tabby was astonished to see how long it had grown. Reaching past her ankles, it rolled across the floor in frothy golden waves. The bristle brush was found, and Tabby sat in the light from the window while, weak with fondness, she worked through the tangled locks, down and down. The evening Tabby found the upside-down cross nailed to the door. She did not tell Rampion. She had come home late from serving at a Burgher's Saint's Day feast and was so tired she failed to notice the two branches tied together and fastened just above eye level. It was the smell of the blood splashed across them that made her stop, made her draw back and cover her nose. Once she had tiptoed upstairs and seen that her daughter was still asleep, she snuck back downstairs again, tore away the hateful token, and cleaned the door until no trace remained. Tabby was well aware that she courted such hate by working in town, but she had hoped they would not find her woodland home. Now the son of the witch has been tacked to the door. "We know where you are," it seemed to say. "We will not let you rest." Next morning she took the padlock from the chest upstairs and fastened it to the little door. "You shall not leave the house today, my pet," she tried to keep the worry from her tone, worked not to sound too sharp or stern. "For a while, you must wait until I come home to go a rambling." Day at the fair threatened to play itself out again in her mind, and she shook her head to banish the ugly scene. And you must not go too far away, must never stray towards town. But why? Rampion was accustomed to being on her own in the forest, to trampling when and where she pleased. I will tell you by and by, but for now you do as I say. Tabby softened, melted by the girl's anguished expression. Have I ever wanted more than your safety and content? The first few days were hard, since no matter how early Tabby rushed home to unlock the tower door, it was never enough. It was never soon enough. The sun is nearly down, the girl would moan. I shall have no time at all. Or, Mother, she would cry, you've caged me like a beast. But then, for no reason Tabby could find, things settled into an easier pattern. Rampion was sweeter now, always ready with soup and a smile when her mother came home and unlocked the door. Occasionally, she even chose to stay inside rather than take to the woods. The forest will be there tomorrow, she would say, making Tabby's grateful heart leap. But you are tired, Mother, and will soon to bed. If we are to sing and sew a bit, it would be best we do it now. In this way, the winter turned to spring, and Rampion asked only few times when her imprisonment would end. She was easily put off with Tabby's assurances that it would be soon, and indeed, crossing the tower door began to seem a mere prank, the idle threat of a child. So on the first day of a full moon in April, Tabby's dreams came true at last. There was nothing to dilute her joy. Mother, the girl announced over their mugs of morning porridge, I must have cut myself on my walk last night. Look how I've spoiled my gown. As soon as she saw the red nightshirt, Tabby's eyes filled. First blood, she thought. My daughter is a woman made for flight. She embraced Rampion and explained that the blood was a ripeness, not a wound. She showed her how to bind herself, how to wash the cloth and bind again. And when the blood has stopped, she promised, barely containing her joy, and the moon is new again, we will take to the woods, you and I. She drew the girl to the window they had fashioned out of the useless door, and together they looked out the forest below. I will show you a secret there, a secret only we two can share. She pictured the clearing and... how do I do that? She pictured the clearing and the woods, imagined them joining the coven's flight. Already, as if it had been days instead of years, she could feel the swift climb, the unstoppable cresting, like a tide in her veins. The next day, instead of heading for the village, Tabby hurried to the sacred grove, or rather, to the spot where she was convinced she had visited so often before. But when she reached the clearing, she found it was overgrown with weeds and the altar of stones missing. There were no stray boulders, no tumbled remains at all. It was as if she and her sisters had never met, had never chanted the sacred words or worn the earth smooth with their comings and goings. Could she have forgotten the path? How could her feet have failed to take her the way she knew as well as she knew her name? For a while she stood, head bent and silent. It was almost like disappearing, losing the last traces of her past. This way. But when she looked up again, there was still herself, still the mother of the dearest, fairest child she could imagine. She had not, after all, heard from her sisters in years, had not sought them out or missed them more than a handful of times. Those nights when the moon swelled and the time when flight neared, she had dreamed of going with them, had felt awash with the old yearning, the call to the sky. But such dreams vanished like dew in the morning, burned away in the fierce love she knew would outlast all others. Nor did she need the sisterhood, she decided now, to pass on the glorious rite, to fly with Rampion at the very next full moon. As she made her way home, it occurred to Tabby that the coven may have simply grown old. She herself, after all, had been the youngest of them, and the rest, she felt suddenly guilty at the thought, may have died. Part of her grieved the lost friends, while the other part trembled with eagerness to share the sweet secrets she knew with Rampion. Little wonder, then, that she failed to notice the second bloody tribute until it met her eye to eye. No harmless cross of twigs this time. It was a goat's head that had been hacked off and nailed to their tower door. The dead eyes were wide, as if stunned by the loss of its body they had been accustomed to steering. The tongue lolled, a steady red stream still poured from the severed neck. Tabby's first thought was, poor thing. Her second thought was, we must run. She realized now that the coven had probably left long before, driven out by the same hatred and violent fear that had turned the village against Tabby and her daughter. There was no time to lose. She told Rampion as soon as she had unlocked the door to her and hurried upstairs, they must escape right away. I cannot leave you alone again, she said. I dare not trust your safety, even in our own home. And where, pray tell, will we go? Rampion clearly feared the unknown, more than the threats of bullies, which were, after all, quite familiar to her. They mean nothing, those louts, she told Tabby. They box with shadows and call themselves men. When I go to town, I point a finger at them and they all fall back hexed. When you go to town? Tabby was stunned and furious. Rampion blushed. Only once in a while, she said, when I have finished picking. She stopped, ashamed by the look on her mother's face. I have told you not to walk beyond the woods, have I not? Dear old Worry Ward, Rampion smiled fondly at Tabby now. I never go far, only to meet my friend for a walk or a game, sometimes to peek at the market stalls. Friend? Tabby's hand was on her throat as she sat heavily suddenly. What friend, daughter? There. The girl touched Tabby's arm as if she were settling a nervous horse. Do not be peevish. 'Tis only for fun now and then. She hoisted her skirt to show her pretty foot. Surely you do not mean to hide the lovely frocks you buy me. Must no one see my finery? She turned this way and that, jigging steps she could not have taught herself. There are those in town who fancy my company, mother, who wait for me to come. Tabby hid her eyes from her daughter's spinning dance, from the mischief in her smile. She felt little curiosity about her daughter's companions, only the need, savage and certain, to banish them from the girl's life. You shall not cross me on this, my Rampion. I will make sure you're safe until I find a refuge for us, a new home far from such friends as nail a goat to the head of your door. Rampion stopped her dance and bent to put a patient hand on Tabby's knee. I know no one who would do such a thing, mother, and a new home would not be refuge for me. She stood straight again, surveying the dark forest outside. I need to sing and dance. I need to see my friend. Tabby was certain the girl meant no harm. It seemed to her that Rampion must have snuck into town with the same careless innocence that sometimes made her bring home the wrong mushrooms, the ones that might have killed them both. She was young, after all, and could not know the deadly poison stored in human hearts. So Tabby struck a bargain, made a promise she hoped would save them both. I will show you, Rampion, my own, she told the girl. Such freedom that you never could dream. Give me until the open moon, and stay inside until the first night she turns her white face on us. It was not so much to ask, surely, of the child she had fed and raised and loved until she felt her heart might burst. Then when you have seen what I will share, if you do not want to come away with me, we will stay here. Once her daughter had felt the night sky against her face, Tabby knew, once she had sifted moonlight between her outstretched fingers, she could never prefer the tame pleasures of flightless companions. But when you come home, surely then I can go out. No, pet, Tabby told her. We must take no chances until I have earned enough to give us a fresh start in the town with kinder folk. She held her daughter's hands like two trapped birds between her own. But I will bring you dainties and games each night, till make the next day pass so quickly you will swear the sun has mistaken its course. To Tabby's surprise, though she sighed a bit and pouted mightily, Rampion agreed. She did not weep or complain of being held captive, but settled with a good will beside her mother, taking up her needle. "'Tis but 2 fortnights," she said, sounding almost cheerful. "I will sew some new sleeves for your gown to keep myself busy, and stir the pot until you come home." Though she should have been relieved, Tabby slept poorly that night. She dreamt of the goat she had found on the door. Not just its head, but the whole goat, swelled to giant size. Its beard was as big as a tree, and its hooves sparked lightning as it ran. It lowered its shaggy head and stormed towards the tower, snorting like a bull. Desperate to save Rampion, who she knew was inside, Tabby began to build a wall across its door. Just as she had fashioned a wall around her old garden, she laid stone atop of stone, in her dream, building higher and higher. But as she put each stone in place, she saw the gulp bowl come closer, felt the earth shudder underneath its flashing hooves. Just as she was tapping the last stone in place, she heard a hideous roar and woke from the nightmare. Her pallet tumbled off the platform, and her nightshirt soaked in sweat. The dream stayed with her all the next day, so that instead of going into town to work, Tebby went back to the cottage to see where she had raised. Tebby went back to the cottage where she had raised Rampion. She was glad the girl was not with her to see what had become of their little home. Marked with an inverted cross like the one that had been tacked over their tower, its shutters burnt away and its door gaping wide. The house had been plundered until it was little more than a pile of rotting timbers. But the round stoves on the wall suited Tabby's purpose, and by twos and threes, she succeeded at last in hauling several score back to the tower in the woods. The next day, with wet earth and sand for mortar, she managed to seal up the tower door just as she had done in her dream. It was cruel, back-breaking work, but even though Rampion begged to come down and help, Tabby was too caught up in her dream and her fears to let the girl out. Stone by heavy stone, she covered up the door and barely paid attention when her daughter had leaned from the window to tease her. For all you love me, Mother, this old monster is luckier than I. She reached down and touched the tongue of the gargoyles that perched below its window ledge. For here he sits in the sweet open air, where I am forced to sniff last night's fire and yesterday's soup. So intent was Tabby on her labors that she neither smiled at her daughter's antics, nor gave a thought to how she herself would enter and leave the place, until the moon was full and the power of flight was strong in her again. Only after she set the last stone and smelt the lentils Rampion put on the cook did she remember the end of her dream, the horror of finding herself on the wrong side of the wall. But this, of course, was different. There was no nightmarish beast storming towards Tabby now. Only the foolish shame of having sealed herself away from her daughter and deprived herself of her own bed. Mortified and bone-weary, she was too exhausted to laugh at her mistake. Instead, daunted and tired beyond measure, she sat down by the vanished door and wept. With no room for pride, she sobbed so long and hard that Rampion, who had never before seen Tabby cry, was moved to tears herself. Please, Mother, she called from the window. Please do not despair. We will solve this riddle by and by. It was not long at all before she did. Tabby wiped her eyes and stared in astonishment when her clever girl showed how she could twist her long hair into a braid and wrap it around the open jaw of one of the gargoyles. When she had let the braid down as far as it would go, she urged her mother to use it as a rope and climb up. Indeed, once Tabby had obeyed her daughter's instructions and rolled old Chauncey's cart beneath the window, then clambered on top, she found that she could easily grab the lovely, sunny ladder that tumbled down to her and hoist herself home. "'Tis very like flying," she said, pleased and smiling when she had reached the top. On the evening of May's full moon, the milk moon the villagers called it, Tabby rushed back to the tower. As she had each day for a month, she called Rampion to let down her hair. All morning she had nursed her excitement, like something warm nestled against her heart. In a matter of hours, she told herself as she emptied the villagers' chamber pots and scrubbed their floors, the hunger for flight would come. Rampion must already be feeling the heat in her blood, stirrings of a woman born to flight. At first, when she called up and heard nothing but wind whistling through the empty windows, Tabby was not alarmed. "Rampion!" she cried, her hand cupped around her mouth in case the girl was reading or dozing by the fire. "Rampion, let down your hair!" A crow in a tree behind the tower answered, but no yellow braid dropped down to her. She spent an hour calling and crying, and then another seated in the miserable heat behind the walled-up door. As she sat, she remembered how bravely and gaily Rampion had accepted her long imprisonment, and how quickly she had devised the scheme of using her braid to help her mother scale the tower wall. How resourceful and quick she was, this child Tabby had watched grow from a babe in her lap. And how slow and stupid Tabby had been. Why she had not seen it before? She was not the first to have climbed the golden ladder. Rampion must have helped her friend into the tower each day the door was locked, and Tabby had the key. How she must have laughed at her mother's loose and easy love. Hi, Unknown. Do I have VR? I do not. Good story? Thank y'all. You have to go? Thank you for stopping by. I'm glad you could stop by for a little while. How she must have laughed at her mother's loose and easy love. And now she was gone, dancing somewhere or laughing with a crowd of friends, making fun of the simple household hours that were all Tabby ever hoped to know of joy. Soon she was tearing the stones with bloody hands, ripping them from the mortar until she made a small hole through which she could push open the door. She raced upstairs and then found what she had known she would. An empty room with Rampion's gowns, all gone, her trinkets carried off, except for a basket of blackberries placed neatly on the table, and the lovely necklace, which must have come undone and now lay broken, its bright jewels scattered across the floor. For 3 days Tabby waited, the hearth unattended, sunset and sunrise finding her still beside the window. Sometimes she leaned out to stroke the head of the gargoyle whose gaping mouth had held Rampion's hair. If witches cry, perhaps mothers can too, she told the crusty stone. When she returns, though, we must not tell her how we've wept. For another week she lived on hope and the few provisions that they had stored in the tower. Surely the gift of berries meant that Rampion cared, that she was coming back. Surely the years of love and squabbling, yes, like a hen and her chick, before the two of them settled beside each other, could not have ended. Finally, though, driven by hunger, Tabby took to the woods to gather wild fruit and to trace her daughter's steps. Each day she wandered a bit further, fanning out and out from the tower, searching for a small boot print, a dropped handkerchief, a whisper of what she had lost. 2 moons filled and faded before she heard the tales from nomads camping in the clearing deep in the woods. It was the story of a witch's child, and the woman who told it to Tabby, juggling 2 babes on her lap by the fire, had heard it from a groom whose mistress claimed to have learned it from the troubadour who had gotten the tale first-hand from a jester in a palace leagues away. It seems an evil witch had won the child from her terrified father, but kept her prisoner in the tower. But one day Rapunzel, yes, that the woman was sure that was her name, had escaped and run off with a handsome prince. She was a sweet young thing, Rapunzel was, with long flaxen curls, and wasn't it a blessing she had tricked that scheming witch? I've heard of such a girl, Tabby told the woman, something inside of her crumbling, blowing away like dust. But her name was Rampion. Rampion, the nomad repeated, her accent heavy and slow. That is how you say it here, yes? She held up her fingers to show what she meant. A small plant for salads, is it not? Tabby nodded, desolate. In our country, we call it Rapunzel. But the nomad had already forgotten her story. She begged now to trade a beaded belt for the vest Tabby wore. Behind her husband proffered a leg of venison to sweeten the deal. It was all Tabby could do to bid them farewell and stumbled back to the tower. There she lit a fire and threw the girl's necklace into the flames. Well, I have to dip, so I have to wake up at 8 o'clock tomorrow. I'm glad I could catch a stream for a good amount of time today. Have a good one, Kay. Thank you, Track Rays. I hope you have a wonderful day as well. Get that rest. Get that sleep. I hope the story helped you, put you in a calm mood so you can sleep well. Sweet dreams, friend. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you. There she lit a fire and threw the girl's necklace into the flames. She then unclasped a tiny locket from around her neck and took out the strands of yellow hair curled inside. That too went into the flames, where it flared, lit up the hearth. Also try not to slip again. I will try. That too went into the flames, where it flared, lit up the hearth, and was gone. For a while, as the jewels on the necklace cracked and blackened on a grate, Tabby thought she heard Rampion calling her. "Mother! Mother!" the voice cried in her head, till she felt he might go mad. But then, as the gems split apart and finally turned to ash, the voice was quiet at last. For 3 days she slept, dreamless, on her pallet until the light woke her. The moon was full again and calling. Veils of filmy white covered everything in the room, the wind rustling like a woman's gown, and the wood dove mistook the brightness for morning and began to sing. Tabby rose from her bed and pushed the heavy chest from the door. She stared at the indigo woods below her, then turned her gaze to the sky. A fat newborn, the moon drew her to the edge of the doorway, filling her with the old longing. She leaned out of the night, the wind nuzzled her bare toes, slipped sly fingers up her gown. She remembered her sister's warning. "You have caught the way of human love," Maeve had said. And Tabby had laughed when they told her she would forget how to fly. Tonight, though, it was not flight she was after. She still knew how to catch an updraft, how to surrender to her current, arms wide. But what Tabby wanted most, what she craved as she stood in the light of her last full moon, was to walk, not fly from this door. To leave behind the loneliness that made her days rattle like chains and stole the taste from everything she ate. To drop like a stone and to put stop to the waiting, the mad dream of the girl racing up the tower steps and into her arms. Wasn't such an end better than trying to begin again when a garden was no longer enough? When the sweet empty face of a flower or the warmth of the sun was nothing but a rush of air, the final fall. And that was the first story, Dame Nygren's Tower. It's told from the perspective of course, Mother, and it's very sad indeed. Beautifully sad, I guess. So the next story is going to be a take on the Pied Piper. For those of you who remember the Pied Piper, it's a story about the rat catcher of Hamlin, where a man who plays a flute, requested by the village infested by rats, would take the rats and would play his flute to play the rats away, ending their infestation. So today we're going to read that story, Pipe Dreams. Give me one moment, please. I need to get myself a little stretch for my back. Oh. Take my advice, you guys. Take my advice, you guys. Be careful not to slip and fall and land on your back, or you might end up spraining it like I did. I feel like it has to be a sprain. It couldn't hurt that badly. So Daisy, all right. Have a little sip of tea. Readjust my butt. There we go. Pipe dreams. When the rats ate Herr Bergmann's footstool, Father decided to call in the mayor. It was the same day they ate my crutch, but I was the only one who cared about that. The footstool meant money, after all. It was nearly finished and had been left on a workbench near my bed. I had leaned my crutch against the same bench, where it would be within easy reach. Easy reach of the rats, it turned out. By the time I woke that morning, the footstool only had 2 legs left, and the crutch looked as though a band of beaver had taken a fancy to it. The carved pad on the top had been nibbled to a stub. The rest was nearly 4 hands shorter than it had been the day before. When I leaned my weight on it, the whole shaft split down the middle and set me sprawling. I am not sure which made Father angriest. The sight of me, far too old to be sobbing on the floor in a pile of splinters, or the unpaid hours and new wood he would require to rebuild the stool. I know that he was red-faced and trembling when he leaned down and yanked me from my feet. "What will it take?" he yelled, bracing me against him as he clamped his huge arms around my waist. Do those monsters need to eat the trim off his wife's jacket for our fool of a mayor decides to hire the piper? I thought of the mayor's wife, a thin woman who walked as if she were standing on her toes inside those fern-lined boots of hers. And then I thought of the egrets that I had carved on the top of my crutch, each one carefully polished with mineral spirits until its wings shone. A crutch is one thing, Father told me, as if he had heard the words I'd only thought. He steered me towards the workbench where 4 small chests waited for finishing. You can make another and in a few hours if you don't insist on decorating it like an emperor's walking stick. He made a snorting sound with the whinny of a large steaming horse, and then looked forlornly at the mess on the floor. The stool was nearly ready. He kicked the legs that remained on the half-chewed base. The old man will not pay us twice for one stool. He handed me a mallet, unrolled an apron of chisels across the bench, and then grabbed his cap and jacket from the pegs by the door. I will call on the mayor after I fetch the birch," he told me, his tone stern, as if I were the one who had chewed the stool to shreds. "Find what you can for supper, boy. I will not be back till that lout and his council have come to their senses." I knew there was endless work ahead, but I felt slightly grateful. Glad that, for once, I was not the lout Father blamed for our troubles. Ever since I was 4 and old enough to hold an awl, Father had complained of my work. For nearly 11 years I had been boxed about the ears and scolded for carving too slowly or polishing too fine. Now, whether or not the members of Hamlin's council saw the error of their ways, Father clearly meant to set them straight, which meant, in turn, I would spend the whole day without being told that Frau Wiedmeier was too blind to notice the finish on her strongbox, or that unless the young spring mints had turned into royalty overnight, they did not require garlands on their settle. As the bells of St. Nikolai rang out the hour, and Father stared down the road, it occurred to me that he had misplaced the blame for our woes. It was, after all, the musical rat-catcher, not the council, who was the cause of this infestation. For the piper, it seemed, was entirely too good at his job. 3 other towns had already hired him, and now all the vermin he sent packing had found their way to Hamlin. Hamlin. I keep saying Hamlin. It's Hamlin. The slithering rodents were everywhere. In cupboards, where they jumped out at you if you opened the door. In grain bins, where cooks found their droppings mixed with the chaff. And often as not, in nurseries, where they waited until dark to crawl into cradles and set the babies howling with their nasty bites. By the time the bells of St. Bonifacius had begun chiming, too, I was already at work. Not on the jewelry chest Father would have expected finished by his return, but on a fresh crutch. Until now I had needed a new one, only when I grew too tall for the old. To own the truth, I had been proud each time that happened, though Father said only the difference between a crippled child and a crippled man was that the man ate more. Like stragglers trying to catch up, the bells in the church by the river always rang late, so now, as those in our cathedral were finishing their song, the latecomers had just begun theirs. Carving as I listened, I was astonished to find my hands deciding on a new design before the rest of me had any inkling of what they were about. I chose a small piece of cherry with a sharp, uneven grain that would make it useless in Father's eyes, but it would do for the armrest of my crutch. And as I worked my carving tool along the grain, I created a jagged range of mountains, like the Weissenberger land beyond our own. The sky behind the range I left as smooth and empty as a baker's plate. Yet by the time both bells had fallen silent, I knew what to carve there. Just above the mountains, I shaped the egrets for my old crutch. Instead of standing on their long legs in a stream, though, these birds are soaring towards the heavens, their wings beating wedge-shaped V's into the sky. With such wide, beautiful wings, I thought, who needed legs? When I was born, Mother hid my twisted leg until after the christening, which is why I was baptized Emmett, a fine name that means hard-working and strong. But I've proved to be one but not the other, although Mother used to say, better a strong heart than a strong back. Father never agreed. The first thing I remembered is learning, much later than most wee ones, to crawl. And the second thing I remember is my father's face as he watched me drag my lame leg after me. Even now, when I catch him looking at me, I know what he sees. A worthless scrap, a waste piece like the blemished poplar he uses when no one will notice, on the bottom of drawers, the underside of tables, and tops of chests he will paint over. While Mother was ill, Father tried to please her by praising my work, or, and this always made her smile like a girl at Christmas, saying he thought my bad leg was beginning to straighten and flesh out. But my leg was getting no better than she was. After she died, one day past Michaelmas last year, he no longer took the trouble to hide his impatience with me, and I no longer had her tender kiss on my head when she bade me good night, or the sound of her laughter if I added a silly new verse to the songs we used to sing. Our earliest concerts featured a single song, Bake Kuchen, bake a cake. She used to sing that one to me when I was little, as she shaped our girdle cakes by the hearth. To bake a cake, you need 5 things, I'm told. And you need 5 things, I'm told. Her voice was light as the bells from the river church, coming to me from above as I sat in the shadow of her skirts. Eggs, butter, salt, milk, and cornmeal to make it gold. Grinning up at her, I sang a different cake for us, one made with worms, toad, mud, and pea to make it gold. When I added my extra ingredients, Mother always reared her head back and laughed. Then she would bend down and scoop me in her arms. Let's keep that recipe our secret, young man," she would say, pinching both my legs until the one I could feel tingled. "I think your father would rather I use cornmeal, after all." There were more songs, more secrets over the years, and the laughter always bubbling between us. And in the end, though, Mother was too weak to even sing. So I did both our parts, singing in the first and the traditional version of our old favorite. I like the one where the queen goes riding, all in green, green, green. Next I would sing my version, which featured all the people in our town, the mayor, wife in boots, 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 Papa in sawdust, dust, dust, and Mother in fur, fur, fur. "And where will I get fur?" she asked me once, smiling gamely from her pillows. I grinned and whispered in her ear, "You know our good neighbor's little dog, the one that keeps yapping all night long?" Mother put her hands over her mouth and then laughed until she coughed, and coughed until I ran for water. After, she laid breathing so hard I was afraid for her. I hid my fear, but vowed never to make her laugh again. I cannot explain how such sad memories made my fingers fairly dance over the wood. Perhaps it was because I knew I could not spend the time on this crutch I could not spend the time on this crutch I had lavished on my others. They had each been fashioned in stolen hours, minutes snatched when Father was at church or delivering furniture or running errands. Always, I had the old crutch to make do with until my new one was ready. Now, though, unless I wanted to be carried everywhere, I needed to finish this today. When the armrest was done, I found a pad of fleece to cushion it. I had just put it aside to work on the chest when Father burst through the door. He was smiling noisily and flushed with triumph. I tried to hide the disappointment that swamped me when the place was filled with his smell, his great arms sweeping across the room. "You should have seen the crowd," he said, glancing only briefly at the chest before me. I had just put one coat of varnish on it, and the brass fittings still lay scattered on the table. I was certain he would rage about how little I had accomplished, but instead he gossiped on. "It seems I am not the only one who wants to beat some brains into that mutton-head of a mayor. The council chambers are full to bursting. The whole town is fed up with the rats." "Did you tell him about the footstool?" I asked. "Yes, but that was nothing next to some of the other stories." He hung his cap and jacket and then sat across from me, reaching by habit for something to work on. As he grabbed the chest, I pulled my bad leg away from his glance, hiding it under the bench. "The miller says the vermin have left him nothing to grind, and one Fraulein told how her baby's fingers will not stop bleeding since those infernal pests bit his hands while it slept." I said nothing, but I put the top of my unfinished crutch under the bench as well. I had not shaped the shaft yet, so I would have to swing myself from bench to table to bed for the rest of the day. Father was sure to find new work for us after our little boxes were done. "I thought we would have to wait all day," Father went on. "Well, everyone told his tale. I guess the mayor did too, because suddenly he jabbed one chubby finger into the air and called for silence. 'Good folk,' he said, 'I have heard enough.' He leaned over and whispered to a member of the council, and then raised that silly finger again. 'I will hire the piper tomorrow.' There surely was never such clapping and shouting. You'd think the old fool was bringing our savior to town. He promised to send for the rat-catcher by first light. He even offered to fetch the man himself. You should have heard the stomping and whistling at that, boy." My father seldom used my name, and I would go days without hearing anyone call me Emmett. The blacksmith apprentice sometimes shouted, "Hi there, Emmett," as I passed the smith's stall, and of course the children outside the baker's all knew me and my soft heart. "Emmett! Emmett!" they would shriek each time I came for the seedless rolls Father favored. "Give us a crumb, Emmett! Give us a taste!" That would be a sight to see, Father was saying now. He had begun working on the chest, his hands moving so expertly with the fittings, he hardly needed to look down at all. "I expect the whole town will be in the streets to watch the piper." He raised his eyes to me, and if I saw no fondness there, his expression was at least kind. "We shall take the morning off, boy. I would not want to miss those inky devils skittering out of Hameln." "I'm afraid I'll only slow you down, Pater," I said, ashamed. "Unless you will allow me to carve a new crutch tonight?" I hated the reedy way my voice rose at the end of the question. The way my eyes avoided his. He barely hesitated. "No need," he told me, waving my concern away with his thick, corded arm. "We will ride in the lumber wagon and have a fine view from there." Nothing, it seemed, would dampen his spirits, not even a crippled sun. Good as his coerced word, our mayor saw to it that the famous rat-catcher came to the town the next day. It looked as though the puppet show or a magical hero was expected. So lined with people were the streets around the main square. Father and I, perched atop our wagon, had a clear view over the heads of the crowd. We could see the grand spire of St. Nikolai rising across from us, and the pie sellers and candy vendors weaving through the throng. The children who normally haunted the bakers were now stationed behind the pastry seller, dogging his every step like pigeons waiting for him to drop some of the sweet stuff. I was wishing I had been able to whittle a new crutch, to sneak away and buy a few squares of honey bread for those hungry youngsters, when silence fell on the square. The vendors stopped hawking, the children stopped playing, and everyone turned and looked down the road from Town Hall. There, marching to the strangest, shrillest tune I have ever heard, a man mulled his way in and out of the streets, gradually advancing towards the crowd in the square. His flowing cape winked from red to green to blue as he moved. His leggings were a bright wheat color, and he wore a small striped cap on his head. By the time he had worked his way to the market square, I could see that his shoulders were broad and his face smiling. I could also see that he was not alone. Behind him, trailing like a long black ribbon in the dirt, were the rats of Hameln. The piper moved briskly across the square, but appeared not in the least alarm, as if there were nothing strange about being followed by an endless parade of rats. And endless it was. Every rat from every rat hole in the city seemed to have fallen in love with the piper's music. Mice, too, had joined the swarms of small, dark bodies that hurried in steady, squeaking streams after the rat-catcher. As if his whistle-pipe had taken ill and could only play in fits and starts, the piper's tune resembled nothing so much as a bout of hiccups, or the whine of a wind trapped behind a thick oak door. It faded and swelled, darted and turned, but to the vermin it may as well have been church bells calling them to penance. Like the sinners they were, they rushed by hundreds, nay, by the thousands, along Market Street and past our astonished eyes. By the time the last rat finally scrambled down the street, the piper had long since disappeared from view. But our holiday did not end there. People began to break from the crowd and rush after the rats to see where the piper would lead them. Father, not to be outdone, flicked the reins across his old patient's back, and turned the cart to fall in line with the others. We rode past most of the good citizens of Hameln until we came to the edge of town and to the river. And though we stopped at the shoreline, the piper and his devil brigade did not. Still smiling between the breaths on his pipe, the rat-catcher was knee-deep in the chilly water of the Weser. He continued to play the strange music, and the rats continued to follow him, right into the water. They leapt the will into the river, paddled briefly, and then sank with a chorus of sharp, outraged shrieks. Soon the water was black with them, chopped to a froth with a desperate splashing. The air around us rang with the shouts of everyone on shore. Father threw his cap against the sky, and I yelled until I was hoarse. It felt grand, indeed, to see the end of those long-tailed nightmares, and to have something to cheer about at last. It was not 2 days later that Father went back to the mayor. The tax collector had paid a visit and had been turned away. "The rats are gone," Father told the man, who, despite his huge girth, seemed reluctant to demand for what he came for. "Why should I give you money now?" "The mayor promised a rat-catcher," the collector said. "Only yesterday he gave his word." "Then he should have given his money too." Father shut the door to the poor man's face, rubbing his hands on his apron and returning to work. But when the blood... Excuse me. Excuse me, one moment. But when the blacksmith and the baker decided to complain to the mayor that he was asking for too much money, Father took off his apron again and went with them. I was not sorry to see him go. The trip to town hall would surely give me the time to finish my crutch. Hobbling as I was from place to place, I missed my wooden leg. As it happened, I could have fashioned 2 crutches while Father was away. I worked happily for several hours, even adding a chain of grazing sheep along the shaft. Then, instead of wondering what was keeping him, I set off for the baker's the minute I was finished. As always, the bigger children were waiting in the alley by the shop. I came out with a loaf for Father and me, and a bag of buns for them. They set up a great hurrah and gathered around me, all talking at once. "Here, look, Emmett," one boy in a dirty vest cried. "Look how skinny I am." He opened the vest and lifted his shirt to show me his belly. "Emmett, that's nothing," a smaller boy yelled. That pig's belly is a mountain compared to my hungry stomach." He closed his eyes and sucked in the flesh under his ribs. The girls in the group rolled their eyes but could not keep from laughing. They weren't about to show their bellies, so they tried a different tact. "How rude these ruffians are," a girl named Gretchen scolded. Taller than most of the boys, she was not above cuffing the younger ones when they misbehave. "If you want a sweet, your talk must be sweet," she told them, and then turned to me. "Oh, Herr Emmett," she whined in a high, thin voice, nothing like her normal tone. "How kind of you to buy those buns." She bent her long frame in a deep, awkward curtsy. "May I try one, pretty please?" But it was Ilse, as usual, who won the first piece. She stood quietly in the middle of the pack, a shy little thing in a black cape and bonnet. When I dangled a raisin-filled bun above the rowdy crew, she did not raise her hands like the rest, though her hungry eyes followed the treat. So of course I tore off a good half for the little cake and gave it to her. "Here, Fräulein," I said, bowing from my crutch. "Gott segne dich. God bless you." Some of these children, I knew, had parents who sent them out begging while they themselves spent the day drinking in the green boar or picking the pockets of those who did. Others had been orphaned or abandoned when their parents died or were sent to jail. These unfortunates tagged along with the rest for protection. But Ilse had a mother, always made sure to tell me, who neither drank nor robbed. "My mother is was in Himmel gehen. My mother is going to heaven." The poor woman, it seemed, was too ill to leave her bed, and like my own mother at the last day, lay patiently waiting for the coffin to stop and her pain to end. Ilse took the cake now, and, as I might have expected, tore a generous portion off to give to a squalling infant in another girl's arms. They were like a family, these orphans and runaways, a tiny family that looked after its own. I knew it was a sin, but sometimes I envied the bigger children. I had a warm bed and a father who taught me a trade, but I had no litter mates, no warm bodies to jostle and nest against. Father came back home well satisfied, whistling as he hung his coat and cap by the door, took up his apron and tied it around his waist. Though I would never have dared to whistle out loud, I was whistling too, inside, where my little beggars had lifted my spirits. The children had all admired my new crutch. Not only was it sturdy and just the right size, but the carving was surely my finest. The sweep of wings, the cut-out mountains on the armrest, and then, along the shaft, a shepherd leading his flock down from the foothills. I could not help feel pride when the ragamuffins gathered around, touching it as if it were a relic in church. How Ilse had laughed as she counted the sheep and followed their tracks with her tiny fingers. I used the crutch now to make my way to our hearth, though I ran the risk of Father's making a joke of the curlicues and doodads with which I decorated it. "And what did he say, the mayor?" I asked, hooking a small pot above the flames. It was well past supper time, and the church bell had rung twice since I lit the candles. "The old fool," Father told me, bent over the last of the 4 chests. "He sings whichever way the wind blows." I could not cook griddle cakes the way Mother used to, but the cornmeal mush made a fine supper with roast turnips. Not that Father would taste the food anyway. He always ate like a human whirlwind, sucking up whatever was on his plate, belching after and stumbling to bed. I once persuaded him that the rat catcher would not very well summon dead rats back from the river, Father said, looking extremely pleased with himself. He agreed there was no need to pay as much as he had promised. In fact, he added, turning the chest, applying varnish with his smallest brush, I warrant he had decided not to pay him at all. But the rat catcher worked the whole morning, I said. Farley surely knew what it was like to have hours of labor go for nothing. Wasn't that why he had gone to the mayor in the first place? He shook his shaggy head. Now, shoved the finished chest towards me. Did you see me smile even once, boy, when I was fitting the lock on his box? He stood up to take off his apron, then came to the table where I set our bowls. Do you see me asking good folk to pay me for a pipe dance? But the rats, even the mice, those vermins were chased here by that rat catcher, Father said. It was all part of his plan to fleece the town. Still, I told him, they are gone now. The piper kept his part of the bargain. He kept it with magic. Those rats were under a spell. Father brought the bowl to his fire and held it out for me to fill. For all we know, the spellcaster is in league with the devil. Would you have me help Satan earn his keep, boy? There was nothing to say. It mattered little whether the piper was a heavenly messenger or the devil's own son. Father would not be persuaded to pay for the help he no longer needed. We finished our meal in silence and went to our beds the same way. It was 3 days later, on St. Paul and St. John's feast day, when the piper came back to Henlo. The mayor gave him no money, and the rest of the council scolded him for trying to do business on a feast day. Then they all hurried off to church, which is where Father and I were when the rat catcher followed his debtors to the great nave of St. Nikolai. The mass was beginning, and we two had just found the bench in the back when the piper strode in through the door. He made his way down the aisle in the direction of the altar. I watched him stop at the 7th station of the cross, glance briefly at the council members who had taken seats up front, and then looked up at the statue of our fallen Savior. The piper, in that moment, bore little resemblance to the smiling magician who had played the rats down our street only days before. Older, wearier, he looked as pained and tormented as the image above him on the way of sorrow. By the time he woke from his sad trance, the councilmen had all closed their eyes and assumed pious expressions. The piper turned on his heel and went back to the street. Underneath the chants for Mass, I heard a different music start up in the square outside. Though it sounded faint as fairy tunes, something in this lively melody made me restless. After a while I could bear it no longer and, bracing my crutch against the bench, rose from my seat. Father was used to my standing so as not to pain my bad leg. When I left his side and walked out the door, he remained unmoving and still, so still I suspect he had fallen asleep. The music had been faint in the church. It was not much louder in the open air. It sounded like a melody played by a great distance away. And so it proved to be. A crowd of children, from toddlers carrying by their brothers and sisters to boys and girls of 12 summers, hurried past me on the road out of town and towards the mountains. I looked ahead at them and saw a line of children, wide as the road, stretching from the gates of the city to the hills. I shook my head and wondered what could be drawing them away when my little family of beggars rushed by. "Come on, Emmett," they cried. You'll miss it all if you don't run." They buzzed past me like a swarm of bees headed for the hive. Only Ilsa and a tall boy named Heinrich stayed behind. "You'll never keep up with your bad leg, Emmett, sir," Ilsa said. Excuse me. "You will never keep up with your bad leg, Emmett, sir," Ilsa said, studying me with sad, grown-up eyes. "He's too old to go anyway," Heinrich told her. "Come on, Ilsa, or we too will be left behind." "Wait," I hobbled after them. "What is it? What is that music?" Elsa hung onto my crutch, jumping with eagerness. "You see? He hears it!" She pulled and tugged me ahead. "Emmett can come too!" "But the piper said," Heinrich turned, talking as he walked backwards towards the peaks of the Lissa Burgerland. How old are you, Emmett, sir?" Ilse unfastened herself from my crutch, trying pushing me from behind. Nearly 15, I told her, suddenly feeling that my age was something to be ashamed of. I told you, Heinrich turned back to face the mountains. He is too old. The piper said only children can hear his song. I cannot hear it well, I told them, stopping to listen again. The piper's music swelled from far away, but it sounded sweet today. Not at all like the brisk, high-pitched tune with which he had lured the rats. Emmett is our friend, Ilse announced. He must come with us. He will share the food and new clothes. Food? I asked. Clothes? Yes, Ilse told me. Can you not hear it in the music? She cocked her pretty head to one side, as if she held a seashell to her ear. There'll be more than we can ever eat if we go with him, Emmett. She smiled, her whole body alert. And firewood for Mama, and medicine to cure her cough. And puppets, added Heinrich. I heard a puppet show. There'll be benches to watch it on, and no one will kick us away because we lack coins. And I hear milk for all the babies, Ilse said, and new shoes with no holes. There was all this in that music? I hobbled faster, my face to the mountains, but I despaired of keeping up with the rest. Then, as we passed our street, I remembered the lumber cart. Wait here, wait here, Ilse, I said. We shall catch the piper yet. By the time I had harnessed old Patience and ridden the cart to the spot I'd left them, Heinrich had gone on ahead and only Ilse remained. I pulled her up next to me and we took off at a good pace. As we traveled through the huge gates that guarded our town, we passed others along the road, and they begged rides too. Soon the cart was packed with little ones, laughing and waving their hands at those who must walk by. We moved more slowly now, but at last I heard the music grow louder. When we caught up to the piper, he marched the children through the open fields and into the foothills of the mountains. He put down his pipe to survey the line of young ones still snaking its way out of town. I, too, turned to see them, and the sight took my breath away. I never realized how many children lived in Hameln, but here they all were. It looked like an army, like the Children's Crusade that had gone to fight the infidels when my grandfather was a boy. Granddad had loved to tell how the children across Germany and France dropped their milk pails and hoes to take up swords and shields. There were no swords in the ranks that filled the winding roads from Hameln, but surely that small army marched on with a good will. On sturdy legs they came hurrying to join us, and those who were too young to walk were carried by those who were not. I could have varnished a dozen chests in the time it took them to move to our position in the foothills. When they had, a great hush fell over them as the piper raised his hand to speak. I pulled the cart as close as I could, and by picking up a few of the children who had crept nearer still, we were able at last to be no more than a few yards from the man who had saved Hameln from the rats. He was not dressed in the gray costume he had worn before. Instead, he was clad in green, like a hunter. He sported no cap, but wore a cape with a great clasp that gleamed in the sun. Kinder, he said, children, your parents are in church. They seem to believe they need not live a holy life so long as they bend their knees at Mass. His smile, like a mischievous child's, belied his harsh words. Excuse me. But I bear you no ill will on their behalf. In fact, I hope to spare you of the hardships that have fixed themselves like barnacles on the souls of your elders. He finished speaking and then took up his pipe and played a short tune. His music was no longer faint, but as clear as if I had leaned over tumbling falls and was letting the roar fill my ears. I wasn't sure what the piper's words meant, but the music made a picture in my head. I saw deep woods broken by a single ray of sun piercing from overhead. A bird, like the one on my crutch, flew out of a tree and called to me. The music stopped and the piper spoke again. Love and song are your birthrights, he told us. Like good Moses, I have come to lead you out of this hard Egypt to a place where you shall have both. He lifted his pipe once more to his lips, and though I cannot say how, played a chain of notes that sounded like laughter. For a dizzying moment, time melted away and I was holding my mother's skirts, smiling into her surprise. Toads on our cake, Emmett. What will Papa say? As I listened, the music turned slower, sadder. Now, perhaps it was the way of the piper rolling his fingers across the stops. The notes sounded like sighs. The softness made me think of Mother again, but this time I remember her voice, how it was thin as a whisper in those last lost days. And where will I get fur? In the place I am taking you, lambkins, the piper told us, putting aside his pipe for the third time. It is always spring, and buds are forever new. Nothing grows old and sour. No one is cold or hungry or lame. At this last, a few young ones turned to look at me, but I did not mind being singled out. I felt almost like an honor, as if my bad leg had earned me this moment. When the rat-catcher ended his speech and headed up the steep wall of the rock ahead of us, his tune changed again. It trickled from the pipe like a sweet May drink that made me want more. That made us want more with every sip. I do not know what the others on the path below us heard in that song, but I know each child in our cart found something different in the ditty. One boy laughed like a yipping pup, shouting that it announced a holiday for apprentices. Another said it was a tune that would take us to the other side of the mountain, where a great ship with a crew of children's sailors laid in port. Poor Gretchen insisted that the piper was playing in a palace, where she would wear gowns of jewels and jeweled bodices and diadems in her hair. I looked at the bigger girl's tangled mop and almost laughed out loud, but Ilsa cupped my chin in both her hands and turned my face to hers. Flushed and eager, the little girl was more alive than I had ever seen her. "Come, Emmett," she cried. "The piper is playing Mamma's cure. If we follow, I will see her healthy and warm." It was clear we could not ride up the cliffs. Old Patient was already silver with sweat, and even a billy goat could not have dragged Father's cart across that rocky slope. "We shall have to go on foot from here," I told the children. Forgetting that I was not a goat but only a one-legged boy, I hoisted myself to the ground and held my arm up for Ilsa. She found my crutch and laid it in my hands instead. That was when it first occurred to me that I might not be able to follow the others. I was swamped with a familiar loneliness, the ancient hurt of someone who has always watched while others ran and played, just out of reach. As the rat-catcher scrambled nimbly up the rocks, playing all the while, I saw where he was leading everyone. Not with my eyes, since nothing was visible beyond the crest of the mountains, but the place came clear to me, as sharp and as real as the wind on the hilltop. In the land the piper played, everyone flew, on wings wide as banners, radiant and fine as sunlight. Young and old traveled effortlessly through the air. My mother was in his song, but she was no longer pale and coughing. Instead, she soared between the clouds and birds, waving as she looked down at me in the mountains below. I waved back, already straining upwards, feeling my own wings sprout from my back, even as I dug my crutch into the rocks strewn along my way. New wings, like two sweetly burning kisses, worked their ways through my shoulder blades. Mamma smiled encouragement and opened her arms while those tender feather buds began to uncurl and lift me above the earth. But not soon enough, for while other children were following the piper, used both hands to haul themselves over boulders and swing across ravines toward the piper's music, I kept holding my crutch. While the rat-catcher's tune gave me wings, they were only a promise, a dream of what I would be when the piper led us home. I could not, throw away my third leg just yet. Soon all the children except Ilsa had left me behind. "Do not worry, Herr Emmett," the faithful girl told me. She worked her little body under my free arm like a second crutch and tried to lift me over the narrow, winding gorge carved by a now-vanished stream. "I will help you." She followed the piper's progress with longing eyes, but would not leave me to fend for myself. With each small advance we made, I could see the end of the line of children moving further into the distance and hear my little friend's sighs grow longer and more forlorn. Finally, I could bear it no more. "Ilsa," I told her, "you must leave me and go on." I had the pleasure of the music keep me company and the vision of my wings. I brandished my crutch like a sword. "I will meet you up ahead." "Nein, Herr Emmett." The yearning of her own dream was still in her eyes and voice, but she would not forsake me. She only adjusted my weight across her tiny shoulders and set out again for the top where the piper had come to a stop. We are almost there. 4 more times before we reached the others, I begged Ilsa to go up ahead, and 4 times more she refused. The piper was stationed above us, playing a sweet, jolly tune that gave us both fresh hope. But when we had last caught up to the others, even his music could not keep my good leg from trembling like the bad. I was unable to take another step. Here we are at last, I panted, throwing myself on a small grassy space between boulders. Hurry up! Hurry up! I will come as soon as I have caught my breath again. Ilsa raised her eyes to the mossy crag above the crowd of young ones. There stood the piper, guarding the entrance to the mountain cave. Many of Hamlon's children, even my little beggars, had told me how they played in such caves, how they followed dark tunnels to underground rivers or to sun and light and flowers of mountain meadows. Which is why, when the rat-catcher smiled and walked to the cave, not one of the children were afraid to follow. He remained just inside the entrance, now waving the children in, now playing his sprightly marching tune. Soon, nearly the whole crowd had walked into the cave. Big brothers carrying little ones, friends raced arm in arm, stragglers picked up their pace and dashed toward the black hole in the mountains. Each of them raced for the dream the song had promised them, each sure they were only steps from making it come true. On they marched, looking for grand meals and new shoes, dead parents and lost sisters, ball games they would never end, and dolls that could grow up with their owners. Beds of lace and silver dishes, talking dogs and smiling moons, and rivers full of fish that caught and cooked themselves. The piper stayed just inside the cave's mouth, waving each child who passed. All the while he kept playing, and all the while wings fluttered in my head and heart. Go on now, I told Ilsa. I struggled to my feet and settled on my crutch again, even though I could feel a blister from where it rubbed under my arms. I will follow fast behind. Making sure she could keep me in sight, the little girl scampered off. At first she stopped every few steps to turn and wave, waiting till I had waved back before going on. Finally, though, the music set her running, and she did not stop until she reached the cave. I watched her bow shyly to the rat-catcher. I watched him pause his tune for the briefest moment as he bent his head to whisper something in her ear. Whatever it was, it made her smile. No demure lass's smile, but a broad grin fit for any careless boy. That smile was the last I saw of Ilsa. She turned to bid me make haste, and then raced eagerly off to the rest. I was nearly alone outside the cave. Beside me, only a girl my own age and a toddler had not yet reached scale the hill to the piper. And if the piper's music had not shown me my heart's desire, had not sounded like wings and my mother's laughter, I had have let those 2 stragglers climb the last rise without me. My arm had been rubbed raw by the new crutch and the arduous climb. At last, though I had to follow a good distance behind the girls, all 3 of us stood before the rat-catcher. Up close, he was even more handsome than he had seemed from afar. His countenance was lined and dark from the sun, but his features were noble. He looked at me with such warmth that I was astonished when he put down his pipe and barred us from the cave's entry. I'm sorry indeed, he told us, that you have come all this way, but you may go no further. At first, I could not believe his words and persisted in trying to enter the cave, as others had before. It was not until he braced his hand on my chest that I stopped trying to slip by him. You are grown past 12, the piper said, not unkindly. It is too late for you. He stared at me, taking my measure as if he planned to fit me with the stockings and cape. Perhaps it is best, after all. The way is long on the other side. You have the heart for it, but not the legs. As for you 2, he told the girls, who stood fast by the cave, clutching each other's hands, the wonders that await yonder are only for the little one. He turned to the older girl. Go home with this lad. Your parents will be glad of your return. I wanted to tell him about the wings I had felt sprouting from my back, about the place where legs would not be needed, but he was already pushing the 2 of us from the cave, and though his dusky face had turned sad, his voice was firm. Be a good fellow and lead this lass back home. The smaller girl tried to reach her sister from behind the piper, while the older one wept, begging him to let her go with the rest. It was not until she and I had been forced back onto the path outside the cave that I realized her eyes were of no use to her. Instead of scrambling up the path, she remained pressed against the rocky side of the cave, trying to feel her trying to feel her way back the way she'd come. "I want to see," the girl wailed as she walked. "Please, let me see." But the piper turned his back on us and withdrew into the cave and raised his hands. As if he had pulled down a cover of a stall or drawn the curtain on a puppet stage, the stone wall of the cave began to thicken and cover its entrance. Bit by bit, the hole sealed itself up, and though I raced back and beat my crutch against the rock, there was no stopping it. Soon there was nothing left but the moss-covered face of a mountain. It was as if it had stood that way for hundreds of years, as if there had never been a cave there at all. The line of children that returned to Henlo that afternoon was a good deal shorter than the one which had set out in the morning. The blind girl, whose name was Berta, and I moved slowly, inching our way back to town. This time, of course, there was no music to urge us on, and my good leg had begun to throb, so that the poor girls leaning on me made each step more painful than the last. Berta told me she had stolen away from home without telling her mother. She had persuaded her little sister to come with her, but now feared what her parents might do when she returned. "I heard the music," she said. "I felt I would die if I did not follow the others. But now I have lost my little darling, and I must live all alone in the dark." She stopped to wipe her tears, and then leaned on me once more. My leg was nearly folded under the renewed weight, but in truth I had begun to feel less sorry for myself. I could see after all, and I could walk where I pleased, as slow as I was. "I am happy for my sister, but what is to become of me, Emmett?" Berta seemed to grow more frantic as we drew towards the city gates. "My mother keeps me like a linnet in a cage. I am never allowed outside the house unless my sister takes my hand." Sure enough, once I had guided her back to the small house from which she had snuck away at dawn, a woman rushed out and, without a word to me, hurried Berta inside. I never saw her again. As for my homecoming, Father was clearly relieved when I walked to the door. "Good," he said. "I have a new order for 3 stools and a hope chest." He set the work out between us and the bench. I told the smith that thieving rat catcher wouldn't want a cripple. I did not bother to ask who might be best called the thief, the piper or the men who had refused to pay in. Instead, I kept my silence. For once, I looked forward to the working at the bench, to a long stretch of hours during which I would not have to put my good leg to the test or lean my sore arm across my crutch. As I said about the new orders, Father told me how the entire town was in an uproar, how all the mothers and fathers had missed their children after church, how they scoured the streets until a nursemaid and 2 mothers reported that all the little ones had run after the piper. The women had called and chased after the children, but the youngsters had hidden from them and scampered out of sight. When I confessed that I too had followed the piper, Father paid me more mind than he ever had before. He held my eyes while I talked, took in every word. He asked question after question, then decided we must visit the mayor once more. "We will send men into the cave," he said. "We will catch that wizard and make him sorry he ever set foot in Henlo." But you know how it turned out, don't you? Everyone for leagues around had heard the story. The cave had not been found, nor has a single child returned to Henlo. All the parents are in mourning in the street down which the piper led his children's army had been renamed. Now we call it Bunulosegas, the Street of Silence. The council had passed a law that no singing or music is to be allowed there. Not that anyone feels like singing or playing music anyway. Henlo is a ghost town, with no little ones chasing down the roads, pleading for pennies to spend at the market or laughing and clapping at the puppet shows. My small beggar friends no longer wait for me by the bakers, no longer sucked in their stomachs to prove how much room they have for cakes and buns. There are other boys and girls my own age left here, but none younger than 12. So we are half of what we were. Forlorn and sorrowful, the some of the parents have not given up hope. Even now, a full year since the piper led the children away, they light candles and place them in the front windows of their houses each night. Sometimes, when I am back from them errands, I look up to see a lonely shadow standing, watching all the windows. Our churches are filled to overflowing with mothers and fathers praying that their sons and daughters will be restored to them. 2 crosses of white stone have been erected at the foothills outside the city gate, one on each side of the place where Berta's little sister and I had saw the entrance of the cave. As for Berta, her mother guards her so closely now, she's not even allowed in church. When Father sends me out the wagon, I always drive past her house in hopes of talking to her. But all I see is a shadow peering from behind the window. A shadow I fancy is Berta, waiting for another chance to run away. And me? My good luck has not recovered from my climb up the mountains. It pains me often now, and Father says I'm useless. Perhaps he is right, for I am grown sickly too, like my mother. Sometimes I burn more wood than I work, sitting by the fire and shivering, even when the day is warm. I have not forgotten the songs of wings of the place the piper's music promised me. Every note I remember, and I sing them over to myself when I'm feeling well enough to work at the bench. I do not know if such a paradise exists, or if, as the town fathers all say, the rat-catcher fooled the children and marched them to their slavery. Ilsa's dream, you see, never came true. Her mother died a few weeks after Ilsa and the others disappeared. I went to see her once, told her how Ilsa longed for her to get well, but she only sighed and turned her face to the wall. Magic and life are both like God's will, impossible to understand. I have put words to the rat-catcher's melody, words that speak of what his pipe played. Every hope you ever hoped, every dream you ever dreamed. It is a song I dare not sing aloud, but it is seldom out of my heart. Every plan you ever planned, every scheme you ever schemed. Now and then, Father looks at me darkly, as if he knows what I am thinking. "Sit up straight," he growls. He shakes his head and nods at my leg, propping it on a stool to keep it from throbbing. "You have carved too deep there," he would say, pointing, or, "Do you want to shame me with that finish?" I do not care. I draw my leg under the table and bend over my work so he cannot see my face. I keep singing inside, where I can only hear. When I come to the part about rising off the ground like an egret, about letting my legs dangle in the sky, I feel those two burning kisses again on my back. He who dares to follow me, he who dares to fly, shall set the wind against his breast, and shall see with God's own eye. I swear to you, my new wings start to sprout, to unfurl in that small closed room where I work under my father's scornful gaze. The certainty comes stealing over me then, a tingling bright and clear as the bells of St. Bonifatus. Once more the piper promised me. Once more the pledge is made. It will not be long before I too have flown away. And that's the end of Pipe Dreams. I hope you guys are enjoying the stories. I hope you like them. And next week, since we're all out of time, next week I shall continue with 2 more stories from 2 more fables that I think you guys might enjoy. But thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for enjoying the stories. I hope you find them soothing or at least interesting and entertaining. And yeah, tomorrow we'll be playing some Cuphead. It'll be so exciting. Very excited to play some more Cuphead. I have been waiting to play some more. I've been wanting to play some more, so that'll be a lot of fun. Alright, so remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. Love you guys so very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!